Hi, I'm Don Cantor, former co-director of JLIC at Johns Hopkins University and current director at the Richmond Jewish Learning Experience in Richmond, Virginia.
And I'm Alex Ozar, co-director of JLIC at Yale University, and this is the Torah JLIC podcast. JLIC supports thousands of young Jews in their college years and beyond, providing them with the nourishment they need to sustain an upward trajectory of Jewish commitment and growth as they enter the broader world. And the animating engine of that effort, that has always been and will always be Talmud Torah, high-level, richly meaningful, thoughtfully creative Torah learning, ambitiously attuned to the realities of where our students are. On the Torah JLIC podcast, we hope to share some of that Torah with you. Thanks for listening.
Today, we get to speak to Rav Jeremy Tibbetts. Rav Jeremy and his wife Emily run JLIC Jerusalem. Rav Jeremy is the director also of student leadership for Yavneh, the JLIC student leadership movement, which helps students on over 40 college campuses in North America build their local Jewish communities. He has a degree in public health from University of Massachusetts Amherst and is currently working on a master's degree in Jewish thought at Hebrew University. Rav Jeremy has published in a variety of outlets, including Chevria and the Lair House. Rav Jeremy loves tennis, seltzer, and writing. If that's all too boring for you, he also studies mysticism, which he has written about. So, Jeremy, if writing and mysticism combine 2 out of your 4 pastimes, can you get them all at once? For example, maybe writing about mysticism while playing tennis and dousing yourself with seltzer.
Yafeh. That's the dream. We should be so lucky. Maybe I can get a little seltzer pool going. I'll work on it.
Amazing.
If you get mystical enough.
Exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do in Jerusalem for JLIC?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me. And I'm sorry that I don't have you have such good podcast voices. I'm sorry that I don't have as good of a podcast.
You sound
voice.
great, Jeremy.
Okay, perfect. Amazing. Here in Yerushalayim, we're so lucky to be working with an amazing community. There's so many people who spend significant amount of time in Yerushalayim. And through that, it becomes a little bit of a dream, like to come to Israel, to be in Yerushalayim, to build a home here. I mean, it's the capital of the Jewish universe. It doesn't get holier than this. And one of the things that was hard, I think, for people over time was really finding a community that felt like it really was a taste of home. And Jerusalem is such a big place that part of what people started to find, I think, is that it became a little bit easy to get lost and difficult to find sort of your spiritual home and your communal home. And that's exactly where we try to come in. We've got a really amazing community. We've been working for about, I guess, between 2 or almost 3 years now on just creating a home for young Anglos in the area who are getting their footing, trying to make the dream come true of building a life in Yerushalayim. One of the really special things that we have going on here is that it's a mixed community. So we have people who are currently students. Maybe they made Aliyah at the age of 18. They did Sheirut or they did the army, and now they are working on a degree. We have people who did a degree in America. Now they made Aliyah and they're working on or a second degree or working full time. We have people who are here just figuring it out, just trying to make it work in the city of dreams. And all of us get to really come together in this amazing environment here, Baka, Katamon, Rechavia, and daven together, learn together, hang out together, volunteer together. It's awesome.
Can you give us some examples of some programs you've run, some events? What does it actually look like?
Yeah, totally. We have some things that we do pretty consistently. So we do Minyan every week, for example, Shacharit. You can catch us 9 a.m. We do Shiurim every week, which are also really great. There are also some things that we try to pepper in. We don't have them working on a weekly basis, but really making sure that we're also creating space for volunteering. So we've also got a series of other events that we do. So we do every couple of weeks like a game night. We have some volunteering sort of opportunities that we do. We've done stuff with Yachad, Friendship Circle, Pantry Packers, which is basically an open pantry for people who need food. We send people, we help stock it, that kind of stuff. The big focus for us is sort of answering this question of how do we create a tight-knit, deep community while also making an impact.
It's amazing and just such vital and sacred work, as you said. What was the last year like in Yerushalayim for your community?
It was tough. In a certain sense, we were really inspired to see people want to come together. We imagined that right when the war broke out, the number one thing that people would want was like a place to take shelter, not physically, but emotionally and communally. That people would be looking to gather in, and that would be their focus. And we were blown away by the desire to turn outwards, to not just come together and comfort ourselves, but to really ask as a community, how can we contribute? How can we make a difference here? The first days were crazy. Our home became a pass through for goods that we were going to donate. Like in the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we had 70,000 shekels worth of donations move through our house. And we packed 2,000 meals, all this kind of crazy stuff. But over time, it also became clear that what we needed to do was to think a little bit more long-term. One of the really special things that we did, we had about 100 kids in rotation. We ran a camp for them for about 2 months until they were integrated into a school system and really kind of were able to make that handoff. So that was a really, really special thing that we did. And that was really the beginning. One of the unique things of living in Jerusalem is most of the other country had pretty consistent sirens, azakot, need to shelter. And in Jerusalem, we didn't have that as much. And so life didn't go back to normal, but day-to-day life to a certain sense did resume here more quickly than it did in other places. And then it really became a balancing act for us. How do we continue to face outwards while also building this sort of core community and creating this landing pad for everybody? So through that, I think navigating that, we learned a lot and we gained a lot. And we really saw that creating community is not, even in a place like Jerusalem, and especially in a place like Jerusalem, it's not like a nice cherry on top, but it's really something core for people in terms of what it means to be here, what it means to build their life here.
It's really deeply inspiring. Thank you.
Can you tell us some Torah you've been thinking about, something you want to share with us?
Yeah, I would love to. One of the things that Emily and I really think about very deeply is what it means to be in an intentional community. So often we think of community as the institutions, the buildings, the organizations, and those serve a critical function. There's no question that there's no community without them. And we try to think as much as we can about the experience of being in them, what it means to be part of them, and really to be in them in an intentional way. I think for us, we feel that our world has become a place where it's harder and harder to find real community, to find real connection. And so we really try to think about what it means to make a connective community where people are growing, sharing, giving what they have. I'm a big empowerment guy, so it's a big thing for me also in general. But one of the pieces that I wanted to share is a really powerful piece to me. It's a piece from Jewish Mysticism, from the beginning of a book called Shar Kavanot. It's some of the more Lurianic intentions that come with tefillah, but don't worry, anyone can follow along with what we're about to read. But it's a very powerful idea.
Can I just jump in real quick and ask you, what are kavanot?
Oh,
and what is Shar HaKavanot?
For a mystical Luddite.
If we had a decade, we would barely get anywhere with the question. It's a good question, but I'll regel achat. We can say kavanot are basically the techniques that the mystics came up with to make prayer work, both internally and externally. Right? What does it mean to make prayer work internally? Prayer affects a change in us. It makes us connect to something. It brings us into a different state of mind. That state of mind is what they called kavanah. But they also believed prayer doesn't just bring us into a certain state of mind, it has a certain impact in the world. And the mystics kind of go off on all of the mystical maps that they make in the different worlds where it impacts. But all of it also impacts the immediate world around them, right? Olam hazeh, this world that we live in. And that's sort of what they mean when they say kavanot. These are the intentions that a person does in order to impact the world, as opposed to kavanah, which is sort of the state of mind that we get into. So Shar Kavanot is basically the book with all of the different practices, techniques, things that you could do. And this is one of my favorites because I think it really cuts to the core of what it means, not just to pray with intention to try to get into that mindset, but also to pray in community.
So we're excited.
The piece begins, Kodem she'adam yesader tfilato beveit hakneset, miparshat hakeidah veilach. So before a person makes their tefillot in the synagogue, before they get ready to pray in the synagogue, and before they read Parshat Akedah, there's all this stuff at the beginning of the Siddur. Not all of us are zoche always to go through it and see what's in there. But one of the things that's in there is the full section of Akedah Yitzchak. So he says, before a person goes into that, tzarich shekabel alav mitzvat ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha. It's a crazy idea. He says, before a person gets ready to pray, what do they have to accept upon themselves? What's the mitzvah that they're planning to fulfill through their tefillah? It's the mitzvah of ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, that you should love your neighbor as yourself. Again, it's a kind of a trip as far as the implications of what he's saying, right? We imagine tefillah bringing me out of where I am to somewhere else. Saying tefillah can't just bring you there; it has to bring you somewhere also here with the people around you. That's exactly what he's going to continue to say. V'chaven le'ahov kol echad mibnei Yisrael kenafsho. And they must intend to love every member of Bnei Yisrael like their own soul. It's all about love. Ki al yedei zeh Tale tfilato klula mikol tfilot Yisrael. Through this, their prayer will rise up and be connected with all the prayers of Israel. V'tochal la'alot lamala v'lasot pri. And it can go up and it can bear fruit. So you think about the dynamics of what he's saying here. What does it mean to accept V'ahavta l'recha kamocha? It doesn't just mean I'm going to pray. Part of praying is thinking about the world, and I have to think about the people in the world who I care about, and I want to try to care about and strive to care about the whole nation. It says it's not just that. It's not just focused here, but our prayers become more powerful if we can bring them together. Not just bring them together by being around each other, but bring them together by connecting with each other, by thinking about each other's needs, by trying to connect to each other and love each other. And through that, our tefillot go up. He says through that, they'll actually make an impact. Uvifrat avat hachaverim oskim b'Torah beyachad. And this is particularly true with the love of a group who learns Torah together. You've got a chabura. If you've ever learned in chabura and real chabura, it's just one of the most geschmack things you can have. Just to be with people who get it, who are pushing with you, you're really getting somewhere in the world of Torah. There's nothing like it in a certain sense. And so he says here, you might think that that's the end of what you can do together, but the truth is there's even more what you can do together. You can take that group, that connection that you can have, and you can turn it into tefillah. You can channel it into the tefillah that you have. Your connection with other people through Torah becomes a connection to God and other people all at once. It becomes this powerful, from Dov Zinger as a whole thing, from 2D to 3D relationships, right? You make room for that sort of third dimension there. And he says, so if you're in this group, avat hachaverim oskim b'Torah b'yachad, tzarich kol echad ve'echad lichlol atzmo kilu evar echad min hachaverim shelo. Each one must take themselves as if they are a limb of one of their own friends. We're all one body. And through that, we have the same needs, the same concerns, the same tefillot. Uvifrat im yesh le'adam yediya v'hasaga ladat u'le'akir lechavero b'vchinat haneshama. If someone has a sense or knowledge to know their friend's soul, v'im yesh eze chaver mehem betzara, tzrichim kulam leshatef atzmam betzaro. And if they have any difficulties, everyone must join together in their sadness. So I think it's cool because he starts with this whole emotion of love and he leads with love, and it's a great way to lead. It's such a nice idea. Like, yeah, of course, we should all love each other. And I'll go in to pray and say, like, I love everyone. But then at the end, he throws in this other piece where he says, it's not just about love in the abstract, right? It's not enough to just love in the abstract. To pray with somebody together means to hold their pain, to hold their challenges, to treat them as your own, to pray for them as your own. To say, I'm not just coming in, praying and saying, okay, Hashem, this is what I need from you. Can you do this? It would be great if it were this way. But to say specifically, I know there's somebody who needs something. I'm close to that person. I care about that person. Hashem, I can't leave today, this shacharis, this mincha, this, I can't leave without telling you, I want to see something better for this. I want to see something better for this person. Through that, through this mutual care and aid that we have for each other through tefillah, it says that's what will lasot pri, right? That will make your tefillah fruitful. That's what bears fruit. What does Hashem want to see in tefillah? We care about each other. So to me, it's just a totally geschmack idea. It's the yesod of community, what it really means to care about each other, to know each other well enough, to not only know what's going on in our lives, but to bring that into our Jewish life, to bring that into our ritual life. And not to say, okay, there's Torah and there's friends, or Torah and community, but really Torah permeates all the things I do. And the way that I live as a Jew is not separate from any of these realms of my life. So those are some of the things that I get out of it.
Thank you so much. It is so powerful and so beautiful. Right, and it's counterintuitive, right? Tefillah is fundamentally solitary. We're standing alone before God, and there are communal elements of tefillah. There are things we do as a community, as a minyan, but the Amidah is just us and Hashem. And the claim is that precisely at that moment, or I guess not just there, but leading up to that, requires the background. You could even imagine these things being intention. You'd have to, that in order to daven well, I need to clear my mind of all the other people around me who are bothering me or making claims on me, and they get rid of the distraction so that I can focus on the Almighty. And the claim is the opposite. If you had to make an argument for this claim, so let's say I said, Rav Jeremy, it seems to me that the way for me to daven effectively would be for me to clear my mind and heart of all other concerns, all other persons, individuals, all other worries about the rest of the world, and focus strictly on what's in my own heart and what that means in terms of my relationship with Hashem, and turn towards God with that. What's the case you'd make for the Shar HaKavanot here?
Wow, great question. Great question. I'll start with just like a general reflection, which maybe we can interpret as stalling or maybe not. First of all, one of the great things I think about sort of the mystical Jewish tradition in general is there's not one way of doing it, which is to say there's plenty of mystics who, not just the philosophers, but there's plenty of mystics, I think, who would also be drawn into what you're saying and see in that an immense value. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, which is something that always sort of strikes me, is that the sort of philosophical and the mystical are not necessarily as far away as we sometimes imagine, right? And you're nodding, so you're also holding it. You're not disagreeing with me, but one of the powerful things that we see is that the mystics and the philosophers, first of all, are both trying to have a deep theological conversation, but also, I mean, historically, the traditions, one potentially stems out of the other, and they weren't necessarily so far from each other. So one answer, I guess, based on that I could just say is we can make room for both. And there's what to be said about making room for both. That's first of all. But if you wanted me to actually make a case and try to push back on it, going up is not enough. And one of the things that the mystics are concerned about and care about is, right, like the maintenance of the world. To believe that your tefillah matters is not to be self-centered, right? If it's just about me and it's just about my connection to God, okay, maybe from a philosophical standpoint, you say that's what Hashem wants of me. If Hashem's Ratzon is what the world is about, then that's all I sort of have to fulfill. The mystics take it a step further. They say, we don't just do mitzvot. We weren't just handed mitzvot because Hashem thought it would be nice for us to connect to Hashem. In the mystic's mindset, Hashem is giving us the mitzvot because they do something for our world. To say my tefillot are only about me connecting, me clearing my mind and going up, mystics are saying you got half the story. But I don't know if it's fair to leave the world behind in the quest for enlightenment. Right? They would say you have to come back down at a certain point, and the goal is not to come back empty-handed. Just to say you have this experience, and you could keep it to yourself, but you wouldn't be a very good custodian of the world to keep it to yourself.
Jeremy, that was honestly the best case for Kabbalah I've ever heard. Like really deeply impressed. And I want to come back to it a little bit. I also just wanted to reflect, I think part of the structure you laid out through the Shar HaKavanot, it clearly, the model includes both poles explicitly, right? Because you have the chabura of learning where everyone's together and talking, conversing, engaging in exchange of ideas. That leads into what is a moment of solitary contemplation in relationship with God, where it's just the individual person. But there was this dialectical back and forth where in that moment of solitary contemplation, you're drawing from the experience of empathy and solidarity with everyone around. And then presumably that goes back the other way. You're learning with your friends and helping them and reaching out for help will all be enriched by the fact that you have those moments of direct conversation one-on-one with God. Really powerful. I'll also just add something I teach every year at some point. So with our students around the context of Armenian, it's based on a Gemara in Brachot, which shows up in the Shulchan Aruch. Somebody who has a minyan in their town or Beit Knesset and doesn't show up, come to davening, they are called. They're not just a sinner. They're not somebody who fails to fulfill their mitzvah of tefillah in the right way. Maybe that's all true also. But the main thing Shulchan Aruch says is that you're a shachein ra. You're a bad neighbor. Davening is about community. And that's the most important aspect. And so I like to put it positively, that showing up to minyan is about being a shachein tov before it's about anything else. Can you tell us a little more about how you came to the serious study of Kabbalah, like what that meant for you, just genealogically, how it happened, what drew you in? Yeah,
my journey is a whole topsy-turvy, zigzag kind of thing. But
the best kinds. Yeah.
First of all, I didn't come from an Orthodox background. Like that's where the zigzag really begins. And like sort of my quest to find my way into the world of Torah. I knew that I wanted something from Torah. It took me a long time to figure out what it really was. Again, through a mix of, really through hashgacha and also through a mix of exploring and shtadlus and all that kind of stuff. I, on my gap year, convinced my parents, they didn't want me to go to Israel and then they didn't want me to go to yeshiva, but finally I convinced them to let me go to yeshiva for 6 months, and I had a really, really amazing experience there, learning for the first time Chassidut. So my family, actually, if you go back on my mom's side, they're all like Belzer Chassidim. going back a couple generations. And my grandmother had like a whole connection with that I only learned about when I was in my gap year. And so I started learning Chassidut for the first time. I had amazing, amazing teachers. I was at Yeshivat Mele Gilboa. I had incredible teachers there. And when I came back and I went to college, I went to UMass Amherst, JLIC campus. Let's go. And I spent maybe 4 or 5 years there learning, Chassidut pretty seriously. And for me, it was an amazing thing. I mean, it was a healing Torah. It was an inspiring Torah. It was a challenging Torah. And I really felt it gave me a new language in the world of my religious life. But there's a thing that happens, and I'm not the only person this happens to, where you learn Chassidut for 4 or 5 years, and behind these Hasidic drashot and ideas, there's a whole lexicon. There's a whole dictionary of Kabbalistic terms, and they tell you what it means maybe in we can call it a psycho-spiritual sense or an anthropocentric sense, but they don't really tell you what it means. So, you learn this concept, okay, there's 4 worlds, and the top one is called Atzilut. So I'm learning these books for 5 years. I'm talking all the time, Atzilut this, Atzilut that, and I'm like, I have no idea what an Atzilut is, or the Sfirot, or all these kind of things. So I picked up, we call it a gateway sefer. They have these like Sfarim that are meant to be for like, okay, you want to learn Chassidut, but you want to get a little bit of the lexicon. So I started learning those, and I learned 1, and I learned 2, and I learned 3, and I was like, oh my God, this is actually the thing I was looking for in the first place. This is so crazy. So I was like, what do I do now? Like at this point I was living in Brooklyn. My wife and I had just been married, and this is like half a year before COVID. And I was like, okay, I want to like dip my toes into this whole Kabbalah thing, and I don't know, I can't do that on my own. Like, it's called Kabbalah, you have to get it from someone, right? I was like, I don't want to end up being like some kook who like, I mean, maybe I'm a kook anyways, but I don't want to end up like, the kook that I guess we imagine sometimes when we imagine these kind of people. So I actually spent a few months, my first time learning real Kabbalah. I joined a Kol Chatzot. It starts in the middle of the night. I wasn't there for all of it, but like, basically, it was nearby enough that I was there for a couple hours.
Is it in Brooklyn?
This was in Brooklyn, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I was down, whatever. Like, I had to commute a little bit, but like to give you an idea, like the guys who really learn there, they're there from 12:45 a.m. to 6 a.m.
What do they do during the day?
Sleep.
Yeah.
Catch up. They're usually not working. Like, right. These are guys who are like, we're learning Torah at night so that there's always somebody learning Torah, so that the world like survives. I didn't do this for very long because it's unsustainable with like living a normal life. And it's like, but that was my first time sort of dipping my toes in. And I was like, this is crazy and awesome and weird. And then I ended up connecting to some rabbis who were in the Brooklyn area who sort of like really were able to give me a foundation. And then we moved to Jerusalem. I was connected, and I'm like, I've been learning with a rabbi here for a few years, which has been really, really good for me in Givat Shaul. That also bridged for me into wanting to sort of explore Kabbalah, not only from that more intense side, but also a little bit in the academic world. And so that's like a little bit what my focus will be in my master's.
What's the experience of teaching Kabbalah been like? And like, does it play a significant role in your communal teaching and learning?
Great question. First of all, it's not for everybody. And it's good that it's not for everybody. It doesn't have to be for everybody. It's something that takes everybody who gets into this time to understand. Partially because if you learn it and you don't want to talk about it with, then you're just a little lonely, I guess. Or for other reasons, I don't know. But it's, first of all, it's not for everybody. But for the people who are looking for it, usually I find that they're looking for it not because they're not interested in some other types of learning or because, some other thing. Most of the time, people who are looking for it have a strong feeling like, this is my Shoresh Neshama. It's like what I'm here for. This is the Torah that like gives me life, that brings me deeper into my relationship with Hashem and with our community and with the world. It's not something that's like normal to like integrate into things. And it's not something that everyone has to learn. But for the people who are looking for it, try to find ways to like open that up for people and give people the chance. But I think the most important thing I would say is like, it has to be bringing you into Torah bichlal deeper. It's like a really critical thing for me to like connect with me over it. If it's not bringing you into Torah more deeply, at least for me and for where I'm sitting, like something's amiss. Like it's not the time.
What does it mean to bring you into Torah more deeply?
It's a great question. One of the things that's really amazing from the Kabbalists who I've like been able to sit with is that the more they learn Kabbalah, the more they're driven to learn what they call like nigle, right? Halacha, Gemara, Tanakh, etc. So it's a powerful thing because sometimes we get worried, and it's not an unfounded fear, that if you let somebody learn this stuff and they haven't been in other areas of Torah in a serious way, or if this is all they're doing, then we imagine these kooky people who kind of go off the deep end and they end up, you can fill in the blank for yourself, whoever you're picturing right now. But the people who I've sat with who take this Torah very seriously, who encounter in it a deep Yirat Shamayim and Avat Hashem, it brings them more deeply into their learning in the broad sense. And so for me, I think that's a very, very important part of it. That if it's pulling you out of other types of learning and it's basically saying, I'm going to learn this and I'm not going to learn anything else, it's about making balance. Part of the power of Torah Tasod for people who really get into it, I think, is that it brings it all together. If you learn the Gra, this is like what the Gra saw in Kabbalah. He saw that all of Torah is one thing. For him, Kabbalah was one of the big languages that he used to bring that out and understand that. And so that's for me like a really important part of it, because people get scared about it, and I don't think it's an unfounded fear. It's important to have that.
When you were talking in response to Alex's question,
sure,
about making the case against having someone just thinking about themselves and clearing their head so they could dive into Hashem, do you think that someone who only has that in their head is missing something, meaning there's a piece missing that they need to add, or is it a qualitatively different, like they're just completely missing the point of tefillah?
That's a really good question. First of all, I'll preface it by saying I don't judge. First of all, that's a chashuv. I don't. Everyone's praying in the way that's right for them, and I'm happy with that. But you're asking me, so I will answer. I think my experience has been that we afford our tefillah less power than we could. I don't know if they always believe differently or they always believe the same, or I don't know. But I think less and less in the world we feel that tefillah do something. We have these ideas, people say my thoughts and prayers, and it feels sometimes to people very cheap. We have this amazing ritualized tefillah. We have this book, which is basically the greatest hits of what it means to speak to God. And we bring ourselves into that prayer book. We bring our full being, ideally, into that prayer book, right? Into that prayer experience. The Kabbalists believe wholeheartedly. They have emunah shlema in the idea that our tefillah does something. They try to tell you what. I can't profess to know always what, or to say for anyone else, even for myself, what it does. But they come with total emunah shlema that it does something. I think to cultivate that emunah adds something immense to tefillah. Have you missed the point of tefillah without it? No, I think there's definitely value in connecting to Hashem, no question. I wonder if cultivating an emunah that I can do more with my tefillah, that there's something I can do down here, can add something on top.
That leads me to my next question, which is, it seems very nice to focus on tefillah of being this an experience where you're really truly thinking and connected to other people. And just being connected to other people can make a huge difference in the world. And so why do I need to worry about what happens up there, or assume that something is happening up there, if I know that there's really good things happening in this world?
Great question. Wow. Yafeh mode. That's a great question. One of the things that's really powerful in Kabbalah for me is that it's not, tefillah is sort of the main course. It's like the best place to make this happen. It's not for nothing that the Arizal connects us to V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, which Klal Gadol b'Torah, right? It's sort of where you can hit the biggest one, the biggest mitzvah, the biggest sort of opportunity. But for the mystics, kavanah, the mindset of kavanah can be brought into anything. So Shar Kavanot is, this sort of one of the biggest volumes, and it's really just about tefillah. But there's also what's called Shar Mitzvot, which is basically the intentions for all the different mitzvot that at least made it to us. There could be some mitzvot that are missing, didn't make it to us. There's a whole history there, but I think that part of the difference is a difference in mindset. So we imagine sometimes that we have an amazing tefillah experience, and at the end we're like, whoa, what opened up in me, right? What happened in my head? Something shifted. And the mystics had a different language. So the Arizal has a great davening, and he doesn't say what just opened up in me, he says what just acted on me. For the mystics, the upper worlds are not like, it's not like mowing the lawn. It's not like I have these chores. I have to go, fix that world and fix this thing. And then I can actually hang out with my friends and learn Torah with them, which is sometimes how it's pitched. It's rather that this complex cosmology and sort of mapping of worlds in their mind is all the different layers and experiences that we can have in connecting to Hashem. So The worlds are not like so much a map. It's not Google Maps. Like, well, I go visit the world of Yetzirah and then I hang out there with the angels and then right? It's more a map of experience. Each of these different layers of worlds is a different way that I relate to Hashem. Standing behind it all, say the Kabbalist is Ein Sof, which is you can't even touch that. You can't even go there. But if it's really Ein Sof, it's Ein Sof Giluim, right? There's infinite relationships that we can have with this thing, with Hashem. And so for the Kabbalists, they were trying to map out not so much an escape from the world, and not even so much, I don't think, a ladder to climb up to get to Hashem, quote unquote, but rather different layers of what it's like to have the experience of connecting with Hashem. What does it mean to connect to Hashem when I'm at my lowest? What does it mean to connect to Hashem when I'm at the height of tefillah, when I'm eating a donut? All of these are sort of the different options and things that they're playing with. And that's what the map really is. It's a map of, this is the constellation of relationships with Hashem that the mystics have mapped out so far.
Jeremy, like part of what I've found so powerful about your formulation, so helpful, I think for a lot of our students now, there was a time classically in the 1960s where young people are identified or it was prevalent among young people to be a kind of radicalism. There was a belief that through action you can completely systemically transform the world. That if we just made the right forms of small communities and we just interacted in the right ways, we could overthrow the man and the military-industrial complex. And I think the challenge I find, and that led to a lot of craziness. And I think it did some good things and did a lot of very bad, vicious things. I think with a lot of our students now, I tend to get the opposite. Like the students who are, say, like most morally, politically, spiritually attuned tend not towards radicalism, the idea that they can make the world better through a little bit of action, or they can radically transform the world, but tend to a kind of resignation and despair and apathy. Like I'm the one, because I'm so reflective and thoughtful, I'm the one who realizes that the world is irredeemable. There's nothing actually to be done. There's nothing I can actually make a difference about. And I know it has in fact become clear just how monstrously difficult it is to make the world any better at all. And so there's a kind of retreat. And I think part of our job is to help them see that the regular mundane things that they do, the way they go about their lives, to be good just people and citizens and to be good Jews who do things like learning and davening together in community. The sense that this can actually have cosmic implications and ramifications that you may not even fully understand or grasp. There's a kind of mystery involved in human action and activity. I feel like Kabbalah, I don't think it should translate fully into that. And part of the claim is that it doesn't. It's not like it will have the following real world implications. Part of what we're helping students see is gain the perspective that you don't need to know like mechanistically what will follow exactly from it. What is that it will make things better in really deep, powerful, elevated, and transcendent ways. And so that what we're doing here in the moment has a cosmic meaning, even if you can't see it. So thank you for that.
I'll respond to that for a second if you'll allow me. Even now, I think, as some of these sort of mystical ideas are trickling out into the world, right? One of the concepts that becomes better known is this idea of like shvirat kelim, the breaking of the vessels, which in short is basically the values proposition of all Lurianic and post-Lurianic Kabbalah, which is you were brought into a broken world. You were brought into a world that was already broken when you got here, but you can do something about it, right? Half of Jewish mysticism is really, how did the world end up this way? So broken and waiting for its fixing. And that's what we call Seder Ishtalshalut. That's the map of the worlds, showing you these are the relationships that we have with the divine and with being itself from within the brokenness that we find ourselves. And the other half, which is really the kavanot, I'm being a little reductionist, but the other half largely, which is kavanot, is what can you do about that? What can you do given that you were already born into that? You were born into the middle of a story which is bigger than you and in some senses feels very dark. And one of the powerful things the Kabbalists did is they really favored and appreciated the metaphor of light. From within the darkness, the best thing we can do is try to find and be that light. And that light can shine not just here, not just above, but mamash everywhere.
All right. I'm still stuck on your thing that you were talking about before.
Bring it on.
Interesting.
Ready.
And I want to know if I'm supposed to be thinking about other people and really truly thinking about other people and identifying with other people, does that mean that I should be limiting the scope of the people that I think about? Meaning it's those people that I have real relationships with, those people I need to be thinking about and davening for and things like that, and perhaps focusing less on the bigger, broader world and the 2D people.
Wow. Great. You all are crushing with the questions tonight. This is amazing. So it's funny. So I brought basically like a more positive formulation of this, but actually in the Radbaz, there's a version of this Torah that we're working through right now in the Shuta Radbaz, right? So the Radbaz was also in Egypt. He was basically connecting to the Ari, and he says the opposite. He says, you can't, just like you're chayav to pray for the people you love and to pray with the people you love, says it's also to pray with people you have conflict with, which, as Jews, is a very scary thought, because, we're all in community, we all know what it's like, but at times, but I don't think he means it that way. He means like if there's people really, really you can't connect with, you can't find that in them, that's not going to be fruitful for your tefillah, right? The Arizal ultimately is talking about fruitfulness for your tefillah. That's so to pre. I think that it does work bishlavim, sort of like in concentric circles. And I think also this partly goes back to what you were saying before, Alex, that there is a need in tefillah to connect individually, right? I mean, just think about sort of the mushal that they're working with is like, you go on this arduous journey and you arrive before the king, right? The king of kings. And basically there you can ask for something. What would be the goal? Obviously not to leave empty-handed. And what would you do in that situation? I mean, it would be natural for a person to say, well, I got to make sure I take care of me. And then where am I going to look to next? I'm going to think about my family. I'm going to think about the people close to me. And then on top of that, I'm going to think about, sort of the town and the world and to work in those concentric circles. One of the blessings we have is that going in front of the king is not as scary as it probably was in medieval times, right? Because presumably, right, Melech Malchim is not going to hit you with his head, right? He's not going to do that to you. And you have the ability to basically work in those concentric circles. I think that built into the text is the idea that we should be praying for Klal Yisrael. That we should try to combine our prayers somehow with all of Klal Yisrael. Yet, he gives this ubifrat, and in particular, the people around you. And in particular, if they're struggling. He's almost giving you a little bit the recipe book for, I don't have infinite time, I don't have infinite intention, I've got to start in my local circle. Sort of a think local, act global. And here he's giving you the think local, and mamash, the rest of the book is the act global, like multiple globes and stuff.
You have to start local.
I think so.
Why? Why do you have to start local?
So one of the things that's really interesting, there's more than one of these types of techniques. So we talked a lot about kavanot, but there's another type of technique that these mystics really cared about a lot, which was what they called like yichudim. Yichudim were these sort of, they call them like letter permutations. I mean, there's no good translations for these things, right? But basically, yichudim were this meditative practice where you, with your intending mind, the same intending mind that you pray with, you sit, you meditate quietly, and you do something with letters. You try to reveal the godliness of letters. So one of the things that's interesting, we could imagine, okay, I meditate on an aleph. Think about how Hashem is a classic Hasidic drasha. Hashem is the alufo shel olam, right? Hashem is the captain of the world. That's what's hidden in the aleph. Say the bet, Hashem is, right, Bala Bayit of the world. That could be one way to do it. But very interestingly, the Yehudim that they made were not generalized meditations on the alphabet. They were specific to individual people to the point where a big question that arises in sort of the post-Lorraine tradition is, can any of us do Yehudim unless they were personally given them by the Arizal? There's an amazing book that just came out, like a scholarly book, academic book, about Kabbalah as a medical language. That part of what these practices are about is what's basically finding a personal tikkun, getting your personal fixing in the world. That your soul comes into the world with certain baggage, certain brokenness, just like the world itself. And through these practices, a person can find their fixing through reconnecting to their source. Basically, put it back together in the right way. So some of these practices are highly personalized. Shar Kavanot, even the book we just read, I mean, like, there's editions out there that are 600-700 pages without commentary on them, like it's crazy long editions. And we have this statement from the Arizal where he says, well, all those Kavanot are really just for one day. The next day you'll have a whole other things you have to do. They didn't see an end to these intentions because they were meant to be a living doctrine, always adapting to needs. So I wonder if part of what the Arizal is telling here, I know there's a long form answer to your question, but I wonder if what he's telling us here is that we have to start with the needs that we can best identify. And that's why he wants you to zoom in on the people who you're close to, which gives you two tasks. Number one, don't just learn with the people who I learn with. I mean, learn with them, learn seriously with them, but don't let that be the limit. You're connecting with people. Very often we table the self and center the text. The Rizal is telling us here that's not enough. It's not going to build the community, the Knesset Yisrael, that at least in his view, Hashem has in mind for us. Right? We can't not be connected deeply, intimately, to the point where we know what's going on in our lives, we know our struggles, and that we can be praying for each other for them. So I think part of why we need to focus in on the people around us is because those are the issues that we can really hone in on, that we can know intimately. And through that, it becomes a real expression also of that idea of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. I mean, even baked into the language of l'recha kamocha, your shachen, the one who's close to you.
Really, Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing all this insight with us, like really deep and really powerful. We're grateful for that, and we're grateful for the work you're doing in Yerushalayim. It's extraordinary and vital.
Thanks so much, guys. Let's do it again soon.
Thanks a lot for coming on.